Bruce and I hoped that our podcast, Renegades Born in the USA, would get people talking and thinking about some of the topics we cover, from marriage and fatherhood to race and the American experience. So I recently asked you for any questions you have for us, and we received some great ones. I'll be answering a few today. Barack Obama, when deciding to start a podcast, how did you determine which topics you wanted to cover versus others? And has your perspective on any issues changed since you've been out of office versus when you were in office as both a president and senator? Since both Bruce and I spent a lot of our careers navigating that space between America as it's mythologized and idealized and America as it is, we thought just having a conversation about that would be interesting because it's something that he and I talked about a lot just when we were hanging out. And so there's certain topics when you're talking about that gap between the myth and reality of America that have to come up. Issues of race, issues of class and economic inequality, issues of power, issues related to masculinity and men's relationship to women and the relationship to families. And look, of course, my perspective's changed a lot since I left office because the country's gone through a lot over these last 4 or 5 years. And I think that helped determine the kinds of things we talked about when Bruce and I got together. What were some of the sounds and songs that capture the many cultural influences of your upbringing? This is a great question. So in addition to all the musical influences that I think most American kids would have, I had some kind of weird ones, like Javanese flute music. It's called kakapi sulit, and it's beautiful. It's sort of this haunting, meditative melodies. Question from Tracy. Did you feel that being a dad helped repair and heal some of the pain caused by your father's abandonment? Tracy, absolutely. You get outside of yourself. The humility that comes with recognizing, turns out I'm not a perfect father either. And seeing your children love you even when you are imperfect. All those things I think help you grow up a little bit. We know your particular affinity to the rap greats like Kendrick, Jay-Z, and Drake, among others. So do you have one verse you can recite by heart? So first of all, Complex, you do not want to hear me rap. My first song by Jay-Z, which is a song that I love. Treat my first as my last, and my last as my first, and my thirst is the same as when I came. And I actually kept on listening to that song during the presidency because it was a reminder that even when you do make it, having a little bit of that sense of still being hungry, still having to work hard, still having to prove something, that's what keeps propelling you forward. But I'm still not going to rap it. This is a question from Dax. Having grown up without a father present, did you find yourself obsessively seeking approval from your male peers? And if so, what were some of those masculine rites of passage? It's interesting. I don't think that I was consciously seeking out approval from male father figures because of my father's absence. What I do think is that I spent a lot of time having to figure out how to show this absent father that I had my stuff together, that I could succeed even though he wasn't around. Bruce and I both talk about this feeling that maybe you got to prove yourself a little bit more than you might otherwise have felt. In your opinion, what is the cure for racism and how do we achieve it so we aren't having these conversations in 30 or 40 more years? Well, look, Emmanuel, I know that you've given a lot of thought and written about these issues of race. I can say in the American context, there are a couple of things that are absolutely necessary. Number one, making sure that our kids know our history, right? The second thing is to make sure that all of us try to reach out, and Bruce and I talk about this a lot in the podcast, being able to reach out to people who aren't like us, and doing so with an open mind and an open heart. So this is a question from Bruce Springsteen. What's your favorite song? Well, of course, it's got to be A Promised Land by Bruce Springsteen. Or maybe it's, I don't know, I'm on Fire by Bruce Springsteen. I tell you, if I had to choose one song that I can listen to any time and it always moves me, it's What's Going On by Marvin Gaye. Here's a question from Justin. Given how much you and Bruce talk about masculinity throughout the podcast, what does it mean to be, quote, man enough? Our definition of being man enough or a full-grown man is really similar to the definition of being an adult, right? It turns out that having a code of conduct and a set of principles and living up to those even when it's hard, maybe especially when it's hard, you know, that's really the definition of being an adult. You know, all the other stuff about how much money you got, or you know, how many dumbbells you can lift, or you know, your ability to dominate others and put other folks down, you know, that is a trick bag that I think Bruce and I talk a lot about trying to get out of, and making sure that we're not passing on to younger men and boys that are coming up behind us and may look up to us. Question from Daniel. I love the episode on the music you both grew up with. What were some of the first live concerts you remember going to? First concert I ever went to live, Earth, Wind and Fire. Fantastic. Second concert, Elton John, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. Had a slew of hits, and he came out and he had a big hat and, you know, big glasses, and put on a great show. Had huge hits. And then Stevie Wonder, I think about a year later. And he put on a concert that was transcendent. And, you know, Stevie can still rock.